we're not lost, we're not forgotten. We are just resurrecting our true self. And at midlife, menopause, that's kind of when the old tower collapses and the new one starts to be built. So
welcome to the Rock Your Midlife podcast, your transformative sanctuary designed to guide you through self-discovery and provide the tools you need to find your purpose and navigate life authentically. Whether you want to optimize your health, boost your happiness, or deepen your self-love, this podcast is your ultimate toolkit. Welcome to Rock Your Midlife. I'm Dr. Ellen Albertson, the Midlife Whisperer, and I am so glad that you are here. If you are a recovering people pleaser like me, a good girl, this show is for you because my guest is going to tell you all about what people pleasing is doing for your body, your mind, your soul. And I hopefully will talk more about how you can heal and move to really pleasing yourself. Hey, if you're listening to the show, I would love it if you would like, subscribe, or leave me a review. I would love to know what you think about the show, the kind of guests you'd like to hear, and welcome. So I want to talk, before I bring Madeleine Eames on, who has a great new book that she's writing, I want to tell you a little bit about my experience as a people pleaser. I was a people pleaser. Gosh, I think until I went through menopause. There's something about menopause that, God, it's like years. I was like this caged tiger, and years of people pleasing and trying to make everyone happy. I just effing exploded. I exploded at my ex-husband. I just was like, I am done. But before that, honestly, I spent my life thinking about what I was going to do to please other people. Like when I was picking a major in college, what's going to make my parents happy? You know, when I was picking, my first mate, what's like society? What's the right thing to do? I was always second guessing myself. When I was raising my kids, it was always about like pleasing them, pleasing my ex-husband, putting myself last. And I lost myself. I honestly lost who I was, what was important to me. I was always trying to bend myself into a pretzel to try to please other people. So if that sounds like you, this show is totally for you. And I think it was like I was climbing up this ladder of success, but that was all built on being the good girl and pleasing others and being perfect. And it just totally overrided my authenticity, my joy, my sense of like, who am I and what am I here to do? Fortunately, I got over that. I talk about people pleasing, the self-critic, and the perfectionist being the anti-authenticity trifecta. When you have those things, and I think so many of women at midlife feel that way, you just can't be yourself and you lose all of your joy. You have no energy. So today's show is going to help you to get out of that tiger's cage. Let me introduce my beautiful guest from BC, Canada. She is Madeleine Eames, and she's been a trauma therapist for 30 years. She's a yoga teacher, she is breathwork, mindfulness guide, and a pain educator. And she's worked primarily in the field of mental health and embodiment to heal trauma and chronic pain. Presently, she is publishing a book exploring the underlying condition that fuels stress and disease in women and the good girl archetype. So she's going to tell us all about how being that good girl is helping us and hopefully how we can start to please ourselves. So welcome to Rock Your Midlife, Madeleine. I'm delighted that you're here.
thanks, Ellen. I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited to dive into this.
I am too, because I'm hoping you can give me some new hints on how to let go of that people pleaser. So I'm curious, how did you first become interested in burnout and the underlying patterns of dis-ease? And you say dis-ease, like not being at ease.
Exactly. Dis-ease, unease. And when you talk about authenticity, it's like being just outside of who you are. So this really unraveled for me. I mean, it's been a thread throughout my life, and I can totally relate to what you were just saying about people pleasing and running your life around what other people expect or outside approval, validation from the outside world for external validation, which is really that dis-ease, that disconnection from our own self. So always looking outside. So I had, I'd been working with clients for decades, and we moved through people pleasing, perfectionism, and all of these patterns with, relative success. But it was almost like I treated it like one stop along the way. And it wasn't until really, it was the beginning of COVID. We had just moved. I was in a new city and I didn't know too many people. Plus, the world was shutting down. And I started to notice that all of a sudden, with the quiet, I was exhausted.
Mm.
I was so tired. And I'd had clients before that had said, like, I burned out and I didn't see it coming. I didn't expect it. And I found myself, long story short, in the same place of I did not see that coming. I didn't know I was so tired. And of course, there's a part of me that panicked. That's, oh my gosh, how long is this going to last? I need to get back on the treadmill. I need to get back out there. But during COVID, there wasn't really a back out there to get to. And so everything went online. And slowly over time, it took a lot, but I had to allow myself to go through, to realize, first of all, that I was really burned out. And COVID for me gave me that time to settle in and actually reflect back on my life because I don't think I would have done this if I could have gotten busy again. But to actually sit and look at my life and explore how did this happen? And
Mm.
it sounds like an easy question. Well, you were working too much, you were doing all these things, but I was well aware of burnout. I'd listened to it. I'd followed women, through the whole journey. And yet there was an unconscious machine that was at work inside my own body that I was not aware of.
Yeah, it's so
So,
common with midlife and I think menopause where we're on this crazy treadmill and we don't think that there's a way off. We think that it's just normal and this is what we have to do. And we associate our worthiness with how much we produce. We're like human doings instead of human beings. And I'm just curious for people who are listening, what's the difference between burnout and just being exhausted or tired? When does it get to that level where, clinically it's burnout?
yeah. Well, I was thinking to myself that I was just tired, in that kind of level of just normal tiredness. I need to rest. But even with rest, I did not feel well rested. And so there was like one day in particular where I had, because now I was scheduling naps in between clients because I was at home.
Mm.
And I went to sleep or I went to lie down for an hour and I woke up 4 hours later. I'd missed my afternoon. I'd missed my school pickup with my one kid that was still at home. And I missed client appointments and I did not feel well rested. And that was the day I remember that after I went and picked up my son from his friend's house, I came back home and I thought, okay, this is not just fatigue because I don't feel like I've restored myself after sleeping for 4 hours. So that's one thing. And it continues on. Like for in my experience, it was relentless. I took COVID tests. I went for blood work. I thought I must have low iron.
Mm.
And sometimes those things go along with it for sure, but it wasn't any of those things. And so it's almost like I had to rule everything out to realize, okay, it was, I had this thought like I don't know this wouldn't happen to me because I was aware. But being aware of the symptoms is not enough if you're not actually in your body, attending to yourself and it moment to moment of what is my energy like? What do I need? And I think when you override yourself for so long, as so many women I know have this program as well, and it's very unconscious, but when we've done that for years, the body starts to say no. This
Yeah,
body
and
says, time out. This is not happening anymore. You are stopping and you have no choice.
yeah, and that's what often I think a lot of times people get sick. They get dis-ease from this constantly doing all the time and thinking that this is normal and this is what I have to do. And I love what you said too, and I see this in midlife women all the time, women going through menopause. They keep getting tested. They go to the doctor. Maybe it's a supplement. Maybe it's my diet. Maybe it's iron. Maybe it's my thyroid. And if you're listening, you need to rest. Like if you're not getting 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep a day, if you're not taking time to do the self-care, to ask yourself what you need, which is really the essence of self-compassion, you get to that place. And I think it's just crazy. I love that book, Rest is Rebellion. It's a wonderful book where she
Hmm.
talks about like that's really like we're bringing back, and we'll get into this too, the matriarchy. Get rid of that patriarchal. I gotta like produce for the man, and more of that. When I'm well rested, when I take care of myself, then I have the energy for everybody else, including myself. So let's talk a little bit too about what you're seeing about dis-ease. What are you seeing? Are you seeing like cancers? Are you seeing like adrenal fatigue
Mm.
when women are burnt out? What's that underlying
Yeah.
pattern of that you're actually seeing it showing up as not dis-ease, DIS dash ease, but also actual diseases like cancer, like heart disease, like adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue syndrome. What is it? What are you seeing in your practice?
Yeah, well, at the same time as this was happening to me, I was running a pain education program, or I was creating it because everything just went online, and at the beginning of COVID. And so I was developing a program for a chronic pain clinic, one of the largest in Western Canada, and working with a lot of clients, a lot of women in classes and individually, and of course my private practice, um, that were really suffering with chronic pain, with chronic fatigue, and then the depression and the anxiety that goes along with that. And as I started to dive in to myself and all the unconscious programming that I'd learned probably, before I was 7 or 8 years old, I noticed these same patterns time and time and time again in the women that I was working with. And so we would try to shift the patterns, look after yourself, rest more, really tune in, self care, all of those things. But there was still like this underlying machine churning away, saying, I should be better. Why aren't I getting better? I should be doing more. But those patterns were not new. Those just exacerbated with conditions. What like I was seeing was I was working mostly with pain, ongoing pain, fibromyalgia, all kinds of chronic pain syndromes. And I started to see like this is not something that's a bonus, like a class that we can put on, like a bonus education for women in pain. Now I work mostly with women. This is actually essential. This is actually part of, I don't want to say the cause because there's so many factors that contribute to illness, pain, and disease, but absolutely it's a factor. So when I saw that I was talking about the same things I was experiencing, I dove more into the research around people pleasing, which means self silencing because
Mm.
we're not speaking our truth. And it turned out, there is a significant factor, the being nice syndrome, in women that get sick. And I think probably a lot of your listeners would be able to relate to that because even if you don't have a diagnosable condition, that it takes away from who we're here to be,
Mm.
our life force. Because I think you mentioned at the beginning, like spending so much energy and time on looking after other people and so much thought energy into, well, what do people think of me? How am I going to show up? How am I going to cope not being perfect or not being who other people think I am? It's a huge drain on our life force energy.
And what I see a lot too with my clients is twofold. It's the guilt that shows up when they start to do the self-care. They feel really, really guilty. So if you're feeling this difficult emotion, guilt, it makes you not want to do the self-care. And the second piece, and that this was, I was doing internal family systems. I don't know if you use that modality, but I was
Mhm.
doing that with a client, and she realized I'm scared to do the self-care and to slow down because if I do that, then I won't be needed and loved. Like she kept her schedule 100% open, didn't schedule any self-care for herself because she wanted to be there like 24/7 for the grandkids because she was afraid that if she wasn't there all the time, she wouldn't be needed and loved. And she was, going through a lot. When she realized that, it was like a big aha. But it's so true what you're saying that that's people pleasing and the burnout play major factors. I mean, it's not woo anymore. We know that there's a body mind connection. I'm curious, where do you actually see the pain? Are people having back pains? Is it more like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome? How does the pain actually manifest in the body? We know the body keeps score. Everyone knows that book by now about
Yeah.
how the body really, emotions are felt
Mhm.
experiences in the body. Where do you see the pain actually showing up? So if someone's listening going, oh, wow, I have that pain in the neck or like my lower back pain, or I just have all ubiquitous joint pain everywhere. What did you see in your practice
Yeah.
when you started to explore the link between burnout, people pleasing, being the good girl, and chronic pain?
Mhm. Well, first of all, I would say it's so individual for every single person. But some of the conditions of what's called central sensitization, this is a large part of my work, is where we are no longer looking at a broken bone or some kind of damage to tissues or to the body, but we're looking at a nervous system activation, sensitization that is really at the basis of things like fibromyalgia, all over body pain. And also, there are clues to this sensitization, um, pain that moves around,
Mm,
pain that changes with the weather, pain that changes. Most people can make this connection that pain increases with stress. And when we have a low grade stress of the people pleaser or the perfectionist, it's going to make you vulnerable to central sensitization. And so a lot of this is what you were talking about, guilt. A lot of it is emotional awareness and expression. And there's so much research around this now. Stems back to Dr. John Sarno from I think the 70s and 80s, but now we've got so much validated research around this that when we suppress our emotions, when we silence ourselves, and I want to say most, at least many women have learned how to silence parts of themselves, how to edit what they say so they can be nice or be pleasing or be palatable, repress anger, and really those emotions that do not fit with the good girl archetype. They can contribute to this low grade nervous system fear, anxiety that contributes to central sensitization. So that was a
yeah.
long way around to your question.
Yeah, and what I see too with my clients is menopause is like throwing gasoline on this issue because estrogen helps to mitigate stress. Estrogen helps to chill you out, make you feel, less stressed. And so all of a sudden when estrogen, it's not that estrogen disappears completely when you're going through perimenopause, but it's a roller coaster. It's going up, it's going down, and your mood is all over the map and you don't feel like yourself. And so I think it's amplifying this issue. So let's talk about this good girl archetype. How did we learn it? I know I
Mhm.
learned it. Like I learned it from seeing my mother. I learned it because I had an older sibling who was acting out, and I'm like, nope, I'm going to be the good girl. It was like that identity was so
Yeah.
strong. But when I look at this, and I also I put up this picture of my younger self on my desk just to remind me of like who she was
Oh,
at
yeah.
3, right before she learned all of these things, and like who is she now, right? holding her. But
Yeah.
how do we learn? How do we go from like we come into the world and we're just so about ourselves and exploring and being authentic. And then all of a sudden we learn that like we've got to be good. And then we learn the self-critic to keep us in place and the perfectionist and all these things. Where does this all come from?
Exactly. Oh, well, you're right. We learned it so young that it becomes a part of our subconscious. And it could be very subtle things like what gets approved of, what do you have to go to your room for, what is
Mm.
not acceptable, what is okay to express in your household. And according to your parents and their generation, like my mom came from a British background where you usually keep a pretty stiff upper lip. And so if you're someone like me who's sensitive, has a whole lot of emotions, that's not going to fit in with that system. So it's family, it's culture. And, I look at nowadays, we've got social media and the pressure there. It must be a thousandfold for young women. I didn't have social media back when I was growing up. I'm about your age, and so we didn't have the internet. I'm dating myself, right? So and still there was the pressure to be thin, to be quiet, to be pleasing, to not be too much. You felt not good enough, to not be angry, and don't always serve other people first. Sometimes it's modeled by our parents, by our mothers, because that's the system that they were in. And it goes back generations, even centuries. The other piece that I really want to bring in is also the epigenetics, that
Hmm.
even though where we live now in North America, we're not usually thrown in jail for, speaking out, maybe speaking out of line or dressing the wrong way. Um, and I want to recognize that that's not true in all countries. But even though we can see that we're safe, it still doesn't feel safe in our bones to
Mhm.
set boundaries, to speak out, to express your anger, to, take that extra helping because you are so hungry and you like to have that full expression. And so a lot of women, they think, oh my gosh, in their minds, right? Like the inner critic, why can't I set that boundary? Why can't I say that thing? Why do I keep silencing myself? And I really want to let your readers know to bring yourself so much self compassion
Mhm.
and grace, and to know that we are moving out of these generations, but we're not there yet. And so we can inherit fear through our DNA, through our gene expression. That doesn't mean you're stuck with it. That doesn't mean the conditioning has, because now if you're listening to this one of the listeners, you're going to have the awareness that you can start the shift, you can start the change.
Yeah, it starts with that
And
awareness and practicing self-compassion. It reminds me of that. I don't know if they had it in Canada. Do you remember that perfume? I think it was called Aangeleerd. I can bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan and never let you forget you're a man. And it's about being sexy and putting the kids to sleep and bringing home money. And it was this kind of like we grew up. I think, in the 80s, I think it was the 80s, like big shoulders. And we were supposed to be like the perfect wife, the perfect mother, bring home money. Everything was supposed to be great. And
Mhm.
we silenced ourselves and our own needs because nobody can live like that. So let's talk a little bit about the missing piece and the solution. So if someone's listening, my whole thing, if you're listening, is self-compassion. Self-compassion is an emotional regulatory technique
Mhm.
that teaches you how to meet your own needs. I'm all about boundaries, things like nonviolent communication. If this interests you, feel free to make an appointment with me. The link is in my bio. I'm happy to help you to get out of this people pleasing place and stop being the good girl. And, dealing with it's very uncomfortable when you start to do this. Although I have to say, again, menopause for
Yes.
me was just like this. It was this big F you. I was just like, as my ex-husband said, I was like Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction. I have Venus and Scorpio, and I was just like, ah! I'm done. So I think that's like we always talk about all
Done.
these issues with menopause, but I was your brain literally changes. You're literally on fire. And I think if you turn it within, I can imagine that literally like burns you alive inside. So for the listeners,
Mhm.
what are your tips and techniques if you just had to give people three pieces of advice besides getting your book, which I
Yeah.
know is coming out August 4th? What
Yeah.
would you
Yeah.
recommend people do to go from being the people pleaser archetype to, I would say, like the badass woman who loves herself and advocates for herself and stops abandoning herself? How do we get from the people pleasing, the good
Mhm.
girl to this really, I don't know, what would you say? What is the transformation that we're looking for here?
Well, you've used the word authenticity. It's real, it's grounded, it's who you are. And it's not one particular way. And I think that's something that I also want your readers to know is that when you start to choose yourself and lead your own life, you might shapeshift from day to day. Because I think one of the mistakes we make is that when we say, okay, I'm not that anymore, and then there's this loss of identity of, well, who am I then? Who, and then we grasp onto something that may or may not fit, but it's in that middle place, in that void of, I that was who I was. That felt like my identity. And what I really want your listeners to hear is that when we've had these patterns for so long, we believe that it's our personality. That's just who I am. That's the way I am. But your patterns are not your personality. They're not who you are. And so when you start to first of all, start to notice them and remember that you're not broken. You are not broken. It's the system that did not validate your true free spirit as a young girl dancing with a tutu at the, singing at the top of her lungs.
Yep.
Someone at some point probably told you to tone it down, little lady. Let's get back into the archetype. And so
But
there's nothing
midlife
wrong with the way
is
that you adapted.
Yeah, I want to say midlife is the time to turn around. I wanted to share too. I love what you're saying about personality too, because I love what Joe Dispenza says. Your personality is your personal reality. You can change how you behave,
Mm,
what you think, how you act. And for me, my work is all about helping women shift from the inside out, change your vibration, decide, you know what? I'm gonna have the courage to step it up a notch, listen to my heart, start having more fun, more joy, being louder, being authentic, all of those things, whatever that looks like for you. And that's, I think, really where the work is. And it can be fun, but you have to get over that
yes,
fear too. There's this
so fun.
incredible fear because again, the body, when you all of a sudden say, okay, I'm going to do that crazy fun thing, and I don't care what other people think, your body's going to be like, oh my God, what might happen to you if you do that thing? And you start to
Yeah,
quake in your boots a little bit. And, there's a part of you, that little girl who learned to be critical of herself, to be a perfectionist, to be good, to be the people pleaser who's going to rebel. And so that's why I always encourage people get a therapist, get a coach, work with someone to be able to see that part of yourself so that you can shift your personality. Like you're saying, your personality is not set in stone. It's formed
exactly.
early in your childhood between like ages 0 and 8. You can decide who do I want to be. And that's the beauty and why I do this show is because your second adulthood, the point from midlife till very, very old, this like these 20, 30 years can be incredible. You can totally change who you are. You start to see that you are
Absolutely.
the creator, the author, the authority. It all comes from the same word author, authority, authenticity. You're the one who gets to decide what makes you happy, what you want your life to look like. But you've got to like sift through all of these archetypes that are keeping you in place. It's hard.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And I think midlife is the perfect time for all the reasons that you've already said. And yeah, I think if there was one thing that I would love your listeners to take away is to even remember that even though your mind wants that, your body is going to do whatever it can to keep you safe, to keep you from stepping out of this paradigm. And so that's the anxiety, that's the guilt, that's the all the fear that comes up. So if there was one thing to have on board, it would be a nervous system tool to regulate and feel safe in your body, maybe before you set the boundary or whatever it is that you're going to do. But that one choice that you're going to make different, you find safety in the body, do the thing, and then find safety again. So it's like sandwiching those choices moment to moment, because as if you're on a journey of shifting your personality or who you are, it really is a moment to moment thing. So what is it right now? What is it right now that I want? Maybe I'm going to make a post on social media and I'm really scared to come out of the cage. So I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to do some deep breathing. I might do some bilateral tapping. I'm going to find some safety. I'm going to do the thing. And then I'm going to go back into finding safety in my body. And each time you do that, you can start breaking out of your comfort zone. There's two things that will happen is you will feel guilty or you will feel fear. Know that and be okay with that. Guilt does not mean you've done something wrong. In a perfect world where we didn't have this conditioning, you'd feel guilty because you bumped into someone's car. Yes, of course, you go and you apologize. Over, no more guilt. But that guilt that rises it's kind of the signature of the good girl archetype. So you have to be able to sit with and move through that guilt without trying to go back and apologize or defend or explain or do all those things that set you backwards.
Yeah,
And this is not a pass or
and I
fail.
love that too, that you have to find tools for your nervous system. I use things like heart math, breathing. I love the bilateral tapping. What I always tell my clients is that guilt is productive if you've done something wrong that violates your core values. So let's say I holler at my dog Rosie, or, I give her a spank because she did something that bothers me. I feel guilty. Like, I don't want to treat my beloved dog like that, or, yell
Yeah.
at your kids. And so when you
Yeah.
violate your core values, do something that isn't in resonance, the guilt's great. It tells you, okay, I did a behavior, don't like it. I'm feeling this way. I'm not going to do it again. And you change your behavior. But in something like when you speak up, you advocate for yourself, you've done nothing wrong. You're there for yourself. So we only have a few minutes left. I would love to know more about your book, Resurrect the
Yes.
Magdalene Tower. It's about this good girl archetype.
Mhm.
Why did you write the book now? And what's the connection? I don't know. What is the
Yeah.
Magdalene Tower? Super curious about that.
Right? Well, I realized that as I went on my own journey through my own body, reconnecting with myself, here's the kind of like the little bit of gold that I want to leave your listeners with, is that each time I ran across a good girl rule of behavior that I had been following throughout probably my whole life, it corresponded with a belief well, that led to one of the seven deadly sins. So don't be lazy, don't be greedy,
Mm.
don't be angry, do not have pride, and don't be envious. So all of these, and I don't come from a religious background, but I thought, wow, that is so interesting. And I realized that it's not only shifting a pattern, but it's actually remembering and reclaiming a part of yourself, to remember your pride, to remember these as integral, important parts of yourself. And, for any woman that picks up the book or reads you are not going to become narcissistic or, someone who's angry all the time. That's not what happens. You actually get to start experiencing the whole of your experience in this lifetime, in this body, all of your emotions. So that led me down a bit of I was sniffing down a research path and reclaiming the stories that were lost, the stories of our body, the stories in history. And I ran across the story. I kind of knew it in the background of Mary Magdalene and her lost or buried her part of the story, which fascinated me. It intrigued me to no end. I went to France. I went to Ireland. I went on
Oh,
all these
wow.
research paths. And And so resurrect the Magdalene Tower, break the good girl codes, unearth your full aliveness. The Magdalene is the tower that you are. That is the truly embodied woman. Magdala, also Madeline, means tower.
Oh, I love that. It's
So
your
we're
name.
building, and yeah, I didn't quite clue into that honestly till I was like halfway through. Oh, yeah, that's me. We're building a new tower that holds all of who we are. And it is, I use the word resurrection because we're not lost, we're not forgotten. We are just resurrecting our true self. And at midlife, menopause, that's kind of when the old tower collapses and the new one starts to be built. So that just ignited me, and the story about that is in the book as well, and that's
Amazing.
where it came from.
Yeah, it reminds me too. I'm a big follower of the sort of psychic and healer, spiritual teacher Lee Harris, and he's been talking a lot about feminine power rising. And I think that with the crazy world we're in, the masculine, the patriarchy has kind of gotten us into this mess of like taking, doing, producing, putting the feminine down. And if you're listening, whether you are in a
Yeah.
female body or not, just this architect type needs to be lovingly put aside, and this new, and I like to think of Lilith too. I don't know if you talk about Lilith, but Lilith was
Yeah.
Adam's first wife, and she was a badass, and that was not okay. So then along came Eve. So I really appreciate you being here and doing this work. The book again is
Mm.
Resurrect the Magdalene Tower. One really quick question that I ask all my guests: what do you love about this time of life? What do you love about midlife or second
Oh my
adulthood?
goodness.
So people listening
I
going,
love this.
yes.
I love the time, the choice, the it's the time in my life to be who I truly am and to express all of those parts that either didn't have time or didn't have support or were buried, all those parts of myself. It really is the time, what I call full soul expression.
Yeah, it is the time
And
to
it comes
step out.
with freedom. It's the time
Beautiful.
to
Well,
step
that's
out.
so important. That's a bit of what I talk about as well, dragon flying, moving from victim to freedom through
Yes.
freedom. And it's really midlife is the time to do it where you realize, you know what? I am the authority, the expert on my own life. And this book is going to really help you. If you're struggling with this, I encourage you to get it. It's Resurrect the Magdalene Tower. It is by Madeleine Eames. And if you need some help, feel free to reach out to me. I would be happy to connect with you. You can go to my website, themidlifewhisperer.com, or just go ahead and grab, if you're listening on YouTube, go ahead and grab the link to schedule a free midlife radiance call. I would love to help you get over the good girl, the people pleaser, because there's so much goodness on the other side. Thanks so much for watching. Catch you on the next episode of Rock Your Midlife. Welcome to the Rock Your Midlife podcast, your transformative sanctuary designed to guide you through self-discovery and provide the tools you need to find your purpose and navigate life authentically. Whether you want to optimize your health, boost your happiness, or deepen your self-love, this podcast is your ultimate toolkit.